Welcome to my talk, Single Directory Components and Storybook. I picked the subtitle, they go together like a nice cappuccino and a good piece of chocolate cake. I'll explain that later. My name is Eelke Blok. I'm a senior Drupal developer at IO Utrecht. You can find me on various socials as Eelke Blok. It's very easy to remember. I'm on Drupal Slack as Eelke Blok. I'm on Mastodon at doot.community, and on Drupal.org I'm also at Eelke Blok. I'm a backender, so full disclosure, I'm talking about the front-end topic, but I'm a backender at heart, so bear with me. I'm a husband and a dad. I'm a bit of a gearhead. I'm a cyclist, and to explain the theming maybe a little bit, I'm also a coffee lover and have a bit of a sweet tooth. So cappuccino and chocolate cake. Why? Why this metaphor? The idea is that they go together great, but you don't need to use them together. So basically this presentation has two parts, single directory components and Storybook, and a little bit about how they fit together, but that's actually in a limited way. So there you have it. So first we'll start with the single directory components. Who was at the talk about Experience Builder? Anybody? Yeah? Okay, so you heard a little bit about it. Sure, do we have room? Should we stand up or just raise hands? Raise hands. Everybody raise your hand. Let's go. Yeah. You can lower your hand if you've never heard of components before, front-end components. No. You can also lower your hand if you've never worked with any front-end components of any kind. Still some hands in the air, great. Lower your hand if you've never worked with Drupal single directory components. Still some hands in the air, okay. Okay, you can lower your hand if you have a cat. If you have a dog, no? Okay, point is clear, right? So we actually have some people with experience. What we'll look at is what's a component. Then we'll look at BS, or before single directory components. And we'll have a look at how you actually use those guys. Okay, so what's a component? Actually, you thought this wasn't going to be about AI, right? But I did actually sneak some in. I'm a great fan of Perplexity, and I asked it, what's a component? And it told me, in front-end web development, a component is a modular, reusable building block of a user interface. It typically consists of HTML markup, CSS styles, and JavaScript logic, encapsulated together to represent a distinct part of the UI. Components are designed to simplify development by breaking down complex interfaces into manageable pieces. Okay, so that's a lot. I highlighted the important parts. Basically, it's a front-end answer to dry, right? When I said I was a backender, and that started around, I don't know, in the age of IE6, right? I basically hated front-end development at that point, because when you change something over here, something over there would fall over. And then I learned about components, and I thought, okay, this is actually the holy grail. This is encapsulating stuff, dry. Who knows what I mean when I say dry? Yeah, plenty of hands, but not everyone. It means don't repeat yourself. So if you're a programmer, you've learned to put stuff into functions, for example, methods, and in front-end you can put stuff in components. So there's different methodologies to handle components in different aspects. For organization, you can use, for example, atomic design, where you start with the smallest of possible components with atoms, then you move up to molecules, where you combine various atoms, and then for some reason they move to biology, because then you move up to an organism that consists of multiple molecules. and so on. Then they completely go off the rails, and they go actually to templates. So it's just a technical thing, and then eventually pages. In other projects, you might see elements and components, because with atomic design, it can be hard to decide, is this an atom, is this a molecule, what is this really? So in some projects, you actually say, don't worry about it, everything, all small stuff is an element, and then the rest is components. So that also makes a lot of sense. Then there's naming conventions. BAM, SMAC, suit, all ways to name your classes. Is this going right with this guy over here? Let's hope this works. And then, of course, different technologies. React and Vue have their own ideas of components. And then, of course, plain HTML, CSS, that sort of thing. So, before single directory components, you could actually work with components in Drupal as well. We have the components module, and what that basically does is it allows you to add some extra twig namespaces, so that you can easily refer, for example, to the atoms and the molecules, or what have you in your component library. What it doesn't do is handle the other stuff around it, so your JavaScript and your styling. So there it went again. There you go. Well, you might actually be hearing me better now, or not? Yeah, okay. So it doesn't do anything about the JavaScript and the styling, so you need to fashion something for that, and some projects just put all the styling together, and others devise something that's actually a bit closer to single directory components. So Drupal's answer, single directory components. What are they? They've been in core since Drupal 10.1, so that's been quite a while. It was experimental by then. They've been stable since 10.3. And everything is in one directory, right? And also not unimportant, it encompasses a twig template, styling, and JavaScript. So what makes it cool? Who knows what this thing is, by the way? Anybody familiar with the picture? AeroPress, yeah, exactly. It's a cool little widget to actually make coffee very easily. They've become a bit more expensive nowadays, now that they are becoming a little bit more popular, but they're nice to get a nice cup of coffee. Who is familiar with Drupal front-end libraries? Yeah, a few hands, yeah, cool, but some hands not in the air. The idea is that you can combine styling and JavaScript files. You can tie them to a name, to a library, and then you can say in your code you want to attach a library, and Drupal will actually add the JavaScript and the styling files. The good part of that is that in single directory components you don't need to really worry about that, because the library definition is created automatically. And whenever you use the component, it's also attached automatically. And lastly, you define a schema. Who was at the Experience Builder talk actually saw why that is important for Experience Builder, because Experience Builder will actually generate a little form for you to fill in so that you can throw your component into the page, and it will actually generate the information and the component with the filled in info. It also ensures proper usage if you use it in some other way. And actually, there's also modules available where it will auto-generate a block, for example, from a Drupal single directory component. So, what does it look like? Single directory components live in the components directory in your theme or module. The base file names need to match the directory name. So the example I took here is called primary menu, and then you see the files are also all called primary menu. There's a mandatory component YAML that defines your component. There's a mandatory twig file. And then the CSS and the JS files are optional. Actually, this is taken from a project where I'm using SAS. So the CSS file is hidden below the CSS file. And also, you can basically dump in any other file that you might like. So, for example, a README for a documentation or a screenshot or whatever you might like to add there. Is this readable? This is the example component YAML, actually. The important parts, basically the name and the status, not so much. You can group single directory components together. Actually, a nice one is you can replace other components. So you can say, okay, whenever this component over here is used, I want you to use my one over here. Then we go on to properties. We go on to the next slide. This is basically the schema part. So this defines what pieces of information need to go into your component. And they actually have a type. So you can see, for example, the title over there. There's a primary piece of information, type is array, which is item string, etc. We'll see a more simple example in a minute. Another important part is slots, and we'll go into both properties and slots in a minute a bit further. But you can already maybe spot a difference that the slot over here up the top, it's body, and it only has a title and a description and no type or whatever or structure to it. And then lastly, you see the library overrides. That's actually to augment that automatic library definition. If you have anything to add, for example, dependencies, then you can add those over there. Okay, slots and props, or slots and properties, as you might guess. Properties. You define them with a schema. Funnily enough, it's JSON-schema.org, but that's fine, right? Because basically JSON and YAML are both structured ways to represent data, and you can apply a JSON schema to a YAML file fine. And they basically map to twig variables. If you want to use a property in your component, you just print a twig variable. So that's very easy. And then slots. Already said they don't have a type, and that's because they map to arbitrary HTML, so you can dump in anything. If you looked at the Experience Builder demo before, Balint was actually just dragging in complete components into those slots, so you can do anything. It's, for example, Drupal can generate these huge blobs of HTML, right? For example, if you render a media item, you get an enormous HTML structure. You don't need to worry about that. You just put it into a slot and it'll be an image. They map to twig blocks-ish, not quite. If you look in the documentation about printing a slot, it'll tell you actually to do this. So it's a bit strange. You define both a block that has a variable inside it. And you don't have to. I guess you can look back the recording of this presentation, but this is actually just the official using your new single directory component documentation page. Okay, so let's look at an example. No coffee for a bit, so that's how you can tell that this is an actual project I've been working on. So there's actually already multiple properties that you can spot from this, right? There's an image, there's a title, and there's a subtitle. Anybody see the missing property? Link, I heard it, yeah. This entire thing is going to link to something because in itself it's just a teaser block basically, right? So you want to actually link out to something. So if we look at the component YAML for this thing, this is what it could look like. So there's a name, teaser card, and it has a few properties. Yeah, I can't read it over here, so I need to look there. A title, a subtitle, an image URL, and a URL to link out. And then there's also a slot. So this is going to be a little bit different than I set for the slot just now. Let's look at the twig for this thing. So up top, there's actually a hidden property that I forgot to include in the component YAML. There's a variant as well. And then you see there's the URL up top in the A tag. And there's the block, the slot, the image, and inside it is an image tag. And basically what you can do when you use this component, you would use the embed, twig embed function, and then you can just override that block image with, for example, a rendered media item. But for a component library, for example, what we'll be looking at later with Storybook, it's nice that you can just pass a URL in there. That's an excellent idea, actually, because it's really hot in here. Okay, so if you were to use an SDC, you always refer to it with owner : component name. And the owner can be either your theme, in most cases, or it can be a module. You can do it with twig include or embed. Or you can actually do it as a render element. So directly from your PHP code, when you would create a render element, you can say, okay, here I want to render a component, and it's owner.component, and then the props are just simple key value pairs, and the slots themselves are again render arrays that will just go into whatever slot you name there. So if we go back to the example, we can use the teaser card in another component. See, so it's 3 times the teaser card we saw earlier. And then over here, you see it actually being used. So the twig runs over an items array, and then it puts in the variables from that from a single item, and it puts them into the teaser card component right there near the end of the for each. Alrighty. Okay, we're nearing the end of the single directory components bit, but there's a cookie to go with the cappuccino, which is drush generate. Who's familiar with drush generate? Yeah, quite a few people. Cool. Who isn't, it's basically a command within Drush that can help you generate some boilerplate code. And as you might have guessed, it also supports SDCs. So I recorded a little video here. I have to look there because I use DDEV. So I say drush generate SDC. I tell it the theme machine name, or it asks you component example. It then derives a machine name from that, which you can change if you want to. It asks you for a description. This is basically the interaction pattern of drush generate, right? When you ask it to generate a module, it'll ask you stuff as well. Do you need CSS? Yes. Do we need JS? No, not in this case. Does it need some properties? Yes, we do. So we add a title property, we give it a description, we tell it it's a string. We add another property called description. Which is also a string. It'll be over soon, don't worry. And then it generates these files. We can actually go into the components directory, go to example, and then there you have it. So that's a very useful little trick to get you started quickly. Actually, it doesn't need to be directly within components as long as it's somewhere below components, so you can do your atomic design directories in here or whatever else way you want to organize your components. All right. Any questions so far? Yeah. No, no, that's all your own party, basically, how you want to handle that. But yeah, no. Any other questions at the moment? No? Okay. Then we'll move on to the chocolate cake, maybe people's favorite, I don't know. Storybook module. What we'll look at. What is Storybook? How it relates to single directory components. Already spoiled that a bit, right? What you could do as an alternative, if you didn't want to use Storybook module, there are other ways to use Storybook with Drupal. How does the Storybook module work? How does it actually make your stuff appear within Storybook? And then a little bit about configuring the Storybook module. So, what is Storybook? I asked Perplexity again, and then when I did that, and I actually went to the Storybook homepage, it basically said this too. So, but Storybook is an open source front-end workshop tool designed for building, testing, and documenting UI components. Here they are. And pages in isolation from your main application. So that's key, right? You want to develop your components without having to worry about the rest. You just concentrate on this one component. Next video is taken from the Storybook homepage. It goes pretty quickly. I'll start it. You can play with what would basically be properties in your single directory component, right? It actually supports some testing functionalities. I've never used that for Drupal. You can see some visual regression testing going on over there. It generates documentation. So that's all pretty neat. We're back at the start. But you can play with your components, right? You can just change the properties, fill in some other data to test if it works with, for example, if you make a very long title, what happens then, that sort of thing. So, the relation to single directory components. Like I said, with the cappuccino and the chocolate cake, there is no specific relation, right? You can use single directory components without doing Storybook, and you can also apply a Storybook module, and we'll see in a minute how you do that, without actually using single directory components. However, there's that single directory, right? And what you can just do, what makes it very nice, is you can actually put your story over there, and it's all still contained in this one neat place. All right. So, if you were not to use Storybook module, you can also do everything in JavaScript. What that would involve on the left is the JavaScript-only version, let's say. You'd have to render your stories and your components, your Twig templates, in JavaScript. So there's Twig ports that actually run in JavaScript, like Twig.js. And then on the right, with Storybook module, the stories are actually rendered within Drupal. So that's just the technicalities, right? What are the implications? To me, it's a bit of a red flag that that does mean that if you're only in JavaScript, then the components actually do not get rendered in the same technology as your live project.
We have some trouble with the heat here.
Yeah.
Can you,
If you want to go around, and go ahead.
sorry for the heat. We have trouble with air conditioning.
Oh, that's a welcome treat, right? Yeah, no, I'll get one later on. I'm next to the door, so it's fine. Okay, so it's a little bit of a red flag that it's not rendered in Drupal. Okay, I'll wait. As long as Rolf doesn't walk in here and kicks me out before I'm ready. No, I actually have some time, so it's fine. Ja, blijf niet heel lekker zitten, hè? All right. So that might give some source of I don't know, contemplation. On the left, with pure JavaScript, you don't have extra dependencies, although you do have that Twig.js bit, so maybe you do. On the other hand, you have Storybook needing to connect to Drupal, and some front-end developers might not like that. Then again, we have ddev nowadays, so you just start your environment, and you can arrange things so that you can just do ddev npm start, and it'll connect, and it's fine, right? So think of that what you will. And then maybe a bit more personal preference. If you do it all in pure JavaScript, then you can write your stories in JavaScript or TypeScript or whatever, which might be your preference. On the right, you write your stories in Twig, which actually makes sense because you're also writing your components in Twig, so, okay. Make of it what you will. Setting it up. First, this is no comprehensive guide, so if you're going to do this yourself, don't take this presentation. Actually, just go to the official documentation for Storybook module. This is just meant as an overview what you need to do. First of all, we need to convert stories to JSON. We're writing these stories.twig files, but Storybook doesn't understand those. But luckily, the Storybook module provides this handy drush command to do the conversion. Then you can set up a watcher to actually, when you create a new stories file, it'll generate the JSON automatically, and also when you do changes, it'll update the JSON files. You need to set up Storybook to look for the JSON stories. And then it's a good idea to actually ignore those JSON story files in Git, because you already have the Twig stories file, and it's just the JSON file is directly derived from the other, so it's a good idea to actually ignore the derived files. Setting up a watcher, this is an example. At the top outline you see a build story script in the package.json file. That's just calling that drush command. So it's a bit of worlds colliding. It's a node or npm package.json file with actually calling some PHP code. And then the other outline is a watcher. I've used NodeMon here. You can do whatever you prefer there to do some watching. And that calls the top script to do the building. Then we need to tell Storybook to look for JSON files. Actually, there's a bit more to it because you need these add-ons too. But that's all explained in the documentation. Actually, it's using for JSON and YAML as well. I'm actually not sure why the Storybook maintainers chose JSON instead of YAML, because I'm a much bigger fan of YAML files than JSON, but whatever. And then, for completeness sake, ignore those stories JSON files. All right. I've labeled these as gotchas, although if you just follow the documentation by the letter, you just come to this, but it's really easy to forget, oh yeah, there's also a Drupal part, and you actually need to do a few things in Drupal so that you can render the stories. There's actually a permission to view rendered stories, so you need to make sure that on your development system, the anonymous user role has that permission. There's a little drush command there that you can use for that. Then you need to set up course, which has to do with whether the contents of a website can be loaded into an iframe, which is what Storybook does. And then it's a good idea to disable render cache and twig cache. So the setup course, it's not difficult. You just tell it, I don't care, do anything. This is not obviously not something you do on a production site, but for development this is fine. But this makes sure that Drupal will not make a fuss about being rendered within Storybook. And then just above the outline, you can actually see a part of the other solution. The more modern way of doing that, since I don't know what core version this is possible exactly, but there's now state variables that you can use to enable twig debug, to disable twig caching, and also to disable render caching. So if you issue these in your development system, then that stuff is disabled. Okay, we're running ahead. As usual, I went a lot faster than in my trials, but even with the ice cream, right, or the popsicles, or whatever you call them. Are there any questions, either about the single directory components or about this part, Storybook module?
With the Storybook module in Drupal, you get also, I've experienced with it, and you get the HTML template from Drupal, and you get a lot of templates. With the pure JavaScript version, you only get the template you want to render, the story you want to render. How do you compensate for that? Because in my experience it clashes a bit.
I'm not sure I get what you mean.
Get a bit of overhead when you do the rendering from the Storybook module in Drupal.
Yeah.
It also generates the HTML .twig file, and it renders a lot of overhead in my experience, and not just the component you want to show from the single directory.
I didn't really, that didn't really bother me. What I did find was that it's really easy to add some supporting HTML. So in your stories, you can very easily, for example, if it's useful for your component to have a background behind it, you can just very easily add that into your story. So, no, it didn't really bother me. So I don't have a solution for that, if it's a problem. Any other questions? No? Then that was my talk. Thank you for your attention.